Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about eyeshadow palettes. Also, to start it off, I am filming on my iPhone, so the quality is a little different. If you like it better, please let me know. So I want to talk about my personal favorite eyeshadow palettes that I've used, and then I'm going to give a full rundown of a bunch of palettes I would recommend for people with various ones, if you want more matte shadows, more shimmer shadows, things like that. So I'm going to start this off with my favorites, as well as inserting some swatches of these, talk about them, and then get into the list of my other recommendations. So if you like this video, please click like down below, subscribe to my channel for future videos. All of the palettes I'm going to talk about today, both the ones I'm showing you and the ones in my recommendations, are going to be per minute because I kind of didn't think it'd be that fair to talk about limited edition things. So I have about 3 to 4 kind of to show you. To talk about. I do not have one of them with me. I actually took it home. So the first palette is probably the best quality eyeshadows I've ever used. This is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance palette. So the packaging is a little dirty. It's kind of like that velvety material, so dirt and things like that cling to it. So packaging is alright. It's really beautiful and nice to travel with. It doesn't stay nice that long. So here are the shades. Again, I'm going to insert swatches. So these eyeshadows, first of all, there's 14 total and 2 true shimmers. There's one that's another shimmer, but it's not very shimmery, at least it's not too shimmery. So if you prefer matte shadows and warm ones as well, you would love this palette. But if you prefer more shimmers and you kind of aren't that creative in terms of coming up with looks, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to you. It is pretty easy to come up with looks. Honestly, all of these are really good together. There's really no bad pairing of shades in this palette. The quality of these shadows is amazing. They blend really nicely. So the next palette I'm going to show you guys is the Tarte Tarteist Pro palette. It's black and gold. It's very reflective. This packaging does kind of get fingerprints on it, but it's really beautiful and it feels like a very nice quality palette. Also, it does have a really good mirror in it. So this palette has 20 eyeshadows and most of them are matte. So all of these square pans are matte, and then there's 4 duochrome shades. This shade on the end is the only true duochrome. I don't really know why they advertised it as being duochrome because these are just kind of shimmer shades. I think they're beautiful, and honestly I've gotten some of my favorite looks with using this palette. There's a lot of warm tones, so you get kind of a similar mix of colors in the Modern Renaissance palette, but there's also more cool tones. So you can go right across each row and they pretty much put the looks together for you, so it's really user friendly if you're just going to go like that. I really like this eyeshadow palette. I will say some of these shadows are powdery, so if you put your brush in, they'll kick up a decent amount of powder and eyeshadow everywhere, but they blend well. I think my eyeshadow looks come out beautiful when I use this. I am wearing a little bit of this on my eyes, and yeah, I would totally recommend it. I believe this is, I want to say $59, but I could be wrong. I'll have to double check. I'll have all of that listed below. And here I have the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. Here are all of the shades. So before I talk about this, I want to say I'm including this as well as the original chocolate bar palette. So Too Faced has 3 chocolate bar palettes. The first one is a darker brown. It looks like a chocolate bar. It's the same, almost the same tin packaging, just different color. It's just brown. And then they have the semi-sweet chocolate bar, which is the same. It's just lighter brown. And then the chocolate bonbons, which is this tin packaging, but it's a light pink with heart-shaped things here instead of peaches. So they all have, those chocolate bar palettes as well as the sweet peach palette have a very similar formula, so I'm including those all together. I don't have my chocolate bar with me, I have that at home, but this is So this is the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette. This was originally limited edition. This palette has broken the internet. So when this originally came out, it came out just as a palette. And then now Too Faced has an entire peach collection, and then they're expanding that even more. There's more products coming out later. Also, if you were unaware, the chocolate bar palettes are formulated with chocolate, like with cocoa powder, so they do smell like chocolate, and then this has peach essence in it, so that's kind of, you know, it's a little gimmicky, but I honestly love it, and I love a lot of Too Faced packaging as well. I love the packaging on this. So these shadows are, there's more shimmers in this palette, but they're not necessarily, all of them aren't necessarily extremely shimmery and metallic. I'm wearing mostly this on my eyes. I gravitate toward this quite a bit, but I also love my chocolate bar palette, my original one. I think my favorite shimmer shade of all time is in that palette. The original chocolate bar palette has more neutral browns. This is a bit warmer than that. The second chocolate bar palette is warmer, and then the third one's cooler. So I will get into those later as well, but I really do enjoy this palette. I think I've come out with a lot of beautiful looks using this, and I really do recommend it to a lot of people. These all are $49. So last but not least, I would like to recommend the Naked One. I love that palette because I think I get stunning eyeshadow looks, even though I do kind of wear practically the same look or a variation of it whenever I do use it. I just think the shimmer shades are really pretty. They're really metallic. You don't have to work with them too much. The shadows blend really well. It is mostly shimmer. That is like the original neutral palette. It came out a couple years ago, and it was kind of the start of neutral eyeshadows being a craze, and that was, you know, it was the Naked palette, and they came out with like 4 other palettes. So yeah, I really do like that palette and would recommend that as well. The Naked palettes have gone up in price over the years, and I believe they're at $54 now. So those are all of my eyeshadow palettes I would personally recommend that I have used. I believe some of these I've used on my list, some of these I have not. So basically what I'm going to get into now is a list of eyeshadow palettes I would recommend for people who want mostly matte shades, a mixture of shimmer and matte, and then mostly shimmer shades. So these eyeshadow palettes, most of the ones I'm going to mention, are bestsellers at Sephora and Ulta. They're pretty well heard of. I didn't, you know, look out for ones, like I didn't find a bunch of these on myself. A lot of these I've heard of through YouTube, through friends, through family, things like that. So these ones have really good reviews. A lot of people really like them, and I figured I'd recommend these to you. So a lot of people come to me and ask me what eyeshadow palettes they would want, or they come up to me and say they want a specific eyeshadow palette, and I say, oh, well, maybe you'd actually like this one instead. So I know a lot of younger girls, especially like shimmer shadows, a lot of people that don't use makeup all that much, like more mattes or at least a mixture, because some people don't like wearing shimmers every day. I will say mattes are a little bit more everyday wearable. Anyways, I have a lot of recommendations. Most of these are high-end, but there's a couple drugstore in there, or just brand recommendations in general from the drugstore. So for matte, I would recommend the Modern Renaissance, because like I said earlier, a lot of these are matte, as well as the Tarteist Pro, because a lot of these are matte, but there are shimmer shades if you want to use those as well. Kat Von D Shade and Light Eye Contour Palette. Kat Von D's eyeshadows I've heard are phenomenal. I've swatched them, and I have used a couple of her face products before, and they're really nice, and they're really soft and creamy, and they blend really well, so I would recommend that. That is an all matte palette. The original Tartelette palette, that is a bit more of a mauvey purple toned palette, but it's all matte. I've heard they blend great. I've swatched them. They're very, very soft. And if you don't want all mattes, there is a sister palette to that I'll get into in a little bit. The Naked Basics palette, they have 2 Naked Basics that are about this big. I want to say it's like 6 shades. They're very neutral colors, very everyday colors. So there's that, and then they have the Naked Ultimate Basics, which is a much larger palette that just released that has more warm and cool tone shadows. That's all matte. That's a, you know, that was a branch of the Naked line that Urban Decay has. The Too Faced Natural Matte Eye. Too Faced has a lot of, so the brand that I talked about right here, They have a lot of 9-pan palettes, and the Natural Eye matte is all matte, but they have a bunch of 9-pan palettes that have more shimmer shades, more crazy colors, things like that. The It Cosmetics Naturally Pretty palette, that has a lot of warms and cool tones in it. So now we're going to get into a mixture of both. So the Tartelette in Bloom palette is the sister palette of the original Tartelette I had mentioned. That is a bit warmer, and there's a couple more shimmers thrown in. I've heard excellent things about that palette. The Chocolate Bar palettes are a good mixture of mattes and shimmers. It kind of depends which one you get. I think this one has a bit less mattes in it than the first Chocolate Bar, but I could be wrong. It just feels that way at least, and I think those palettes are really nice. Honestly, I would just recommend going to Ulta or Sephora, swatching them and seeing what color selection you like the best, because the quality in them is pretty much the same across the board. It's just kind of what colors that you would prefer. So the Lorac Pro palettes, there's 3 of them, and I own the first one. That was actually my first high-end eyeshadow palette. That palette is more warm than the other 2, but it does have cool tones in it as well. There's a good selection of colors. That is a palette I would recommend to someone who doesn't buy a lot of eyeshadow and kind of wants a bit of everything. The way they're designed is the top row is all matte and the bottom row is all shimmer. So I believe there's 16 shades. So there's a perfect, 50-50 amount of matte and shimmers. They're really easy to blend. They're really soft, I will say. You almost have to be careful with them because they're so soft. But the second palette out of that line is a bit more cool tone, and the third is more, it's really everyday wearable. It's very neutral and light shades, so it's nothing too deep. If you want just more natural looks, I would recommend the third one. So the e.l.f. palettes, there's the Prism palette, and they have a couple matte palettes. I know some of those can be hit or miss, but generally the bigger e.l.f. eyeshadow palettes are pretty good. NYX has some great ones. I've heard great things about their colored eyeshadow palettes as well. And 2 brands to recommend are Makeup Geek and Colourpop. I've not personally used Makeup Geek shadows. Makeup Geek is a brand that is a YouTuber brand, and she is online only. And she makes a lot of the single pan eyeshadows, so you would get like a Z palette, like a magnetic palette, and stick them in there. She also has some other makeup products, but I've heard amazing things about her eyeshadows, and they're pretty cheap. And same with Colourpop. Colourpop, I have a lot of their like creamy kind of wet feeling eyeshadows, but they have released the normal pressed pigment eyeshadows, and I've heard good things about those. Colourpop is also very, very cheap. You can find a lot of coupon codes, things like that, but they are online only on their website. So for more shimmer shades, there's the Too Faced Sweet Peach, like I had mentioned before. The Naked palettes overall are more shimmer than mattes, I find, especially the first one, the third one, and I believe the second. The Wet n Wild Comfort Zone palette that I have talked about before in a couple of videos, that is from the drugstore, and it is really, really affordable, but it is all shimmer shades. Makeup Revolution, this is a brand that is UK based, but it has come to Ulta, and they are famous for duping a lot of high-end brands. So they have palettes that look almost identical to the Kat Von D Shade and Light palette I mentioned, the Chocolate Bar palettes. The Chocolate Bar palettes they have are almost, a lot of them are primarily shimmer shades, but I know they have, like, the Kat Von D one is all matte, but I've heard great things about their eyeshadows. The Lorac Unzipped palettes, there's an Lorac Unzipped and an Unzipped Gold. The Unzipped is more mauve-y kind of pinky shades, and the Unzipped is more gold shades. They do have a good mixture, but they're mostly shimmer, and I've heard great things about those. The CoverGirl TruNaked eyeshadow palettes, those are pretty affordable. I've heard great things about those as well. And also my last recommendation is to look for the smaller travel size or mini palettes. Tarte especially sells smaller versions of their larger eyeshadow palettes. Like, they have a 6-pan palette that has 6 shades from this, and they also sell a lot of limited edition smaller palettes, and Lorac also sells smaller versions of their eyeshadow palettes. So if you're not looking to invest as much money but you want something a little bit more travel friendly, I would really recommend those. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see a tutorial in this look, let me know. I'm thinking of filming one coming up soon. But yeah, I hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.